20 years old, from Encino, California. First time using Grindr, I was 14 years old. It was back home in Modesto. I had met with this gentleman who was 5 years older than me, roughly. I snuck out of my room that night to meet with him, climbed out of my window and over the fence, met him in his car. That was actually the very first time that I had given head to someone, and it was my very first sexual encounter. Flash forward to when I was 16 years old, I met up with a gentleman who was in his early 40s, simply because it seemed he was solely interested in meeting for coffee and hanging out with me. Later on that evening, things escalated rather quickly, and he took advantage of me in a sense where it wasn't consensual, and it happened multiple times in the same night. I remember falling asleep and waking up but not being completely coherent, and I remember just being sore all over, like someone had almost like beat me or had been hit by a car. And I just remember walking out of the front door and walking home, and walking from one city to the next, like almost like 15 miles to walk home. And I didn't speak to him after that. I actually deleted Grindr for a long period. There was a pretty big gap where I wasn't a user, because of what had happened. And I mean, I didn't speak to him for a very long time, and one day I just decided to upload Grindr again and open it, and lo and behold, he was the very first person that messaged me. It was the only message I had, and he asked where I had been, how I had been doing, and he asked me to come over again. And I did. He picked me up, he took me out to dinner, and it was almost like I had gotten stung by a bee from reaching into the beehive, and then a year later gone back and reached my hand into the same beehive to get stung by the exact same bee all over again, and put myself in a very similar situation where this time he didn't drug me, but he held me against my will. He became very violent in the scenario that he pretty much just held me down and forced me to have sex with him. And then once he was done, he let me leave. 6 months after that, I became very sick. I woke up one morning and I felt like I had been hit by a car. I mean, my hips were hurting, my joints were really sore, and I went to the doctor and he told me it was chlamydia. And I remember laughing just because thinking like, okay, it's nothing. That, like, it's no big deal, like, whatever, you can get rid of that. Turns out they had confused the test that they had taken from me. They called me the next day at school. I was in second period, I remember this, like it was yesterday. They called me second period at school, told me that I needed to leave school immediately and come straight to the doctor's office. And there, my pediatrician at the time, because I wasn't 18 yet, sat me down, and he started crying. And I just remember him looking at me and he said, "This is not a death sentence. People with HIV can live for years now." And I just thought to myself, I did this to myself. I deserved this for what I had done and the things that I had put my body through. This was my responsibility and this was my doing. And I just started crying. I couldn't contain my emotions at that point, and I broke down. I didn't tell anybody for a very long time what had happened to me. I kind of shut down, in a sense. I didn't talk to people about it. I stopped in going to public school and enrolled in a private program to finish out my high school degree. And when I contacted him to let him know, he didn't answer at first. And so I kept trying. And eventually I got a hold of him. And when I told him what happened, all he said was good. And he told me, he's like, "You deserve it." And then he hung up the phone. I've never spoken to him again. I mean, from when I was 16 to now, things have changed so much. I've learned a lot about myself as a person. I just don't see myself as having a ton of self-worth because of it, because of all of the people on Grindr who have denied me, and a lot of the things that people say. I mean, I get tons of messages that say, "Oh, you're 20 years old and you're HIV positive. What a waste," or like really crude things like, "I can't believe you're dirty enough to be positive at this young of an age," things like that. Given that I was infected without knowing it and without my consent, I feel it's my personal vendetta or my own personal mission to keep people safe. It's not fair to anybody that, I mean, just because you want to feel sexual satisfaction, that you lie to someone about your status. I think every person who is positive should take care of themselves, take their medication, and be open about their status. I mean, there's so much knowledge out there about HIV, but at the same time, there's even more ignorance. I've actually yet to meet anybody under the age of 21 who's been interested in me because of my status. I find that on Grindr, it's primarily between the age bracket of like 40 and 65 of men who try and message me and try to meet with me, and I think in a sense I'm scarred from meeting with older men from what happened. A lot of the people that I've been with, I'm typically their first person that they've been with that's positive. And so I'm able to kind of educate them and kind of tell them the do's and don'ts and the easy ways to stay safe. Know what you stand for and be careful who you meet, because you never know. It can seem that they have a perfect body and the perfect dimensions online. They could be 6'2" and 21 years old with a 171 body weight, but they could be a total creep. You really never know who's out there and what their actual intentions are. But at the same time, it could be your next best friend. It could be someone who wants to take care of you and look out for you. I've made lifelong friends because of this app, but I've also gained something else that's lifelong and not so fun, but I've grown from it, so